Hi guys, thanks for tuning in. I'm Leanna Minshall and I am the owner operator of minshallsmeadows.ca. And today I'd like to make a video to share with you on how to make a machine applique. I guess I'll just start with a little story about why I'm making the stitch out that I chose. My son Darius, he absolutely loves Baby Shark. He knows the songs forwards, he knows it backwards, he knows all the little hand gestures. Suffice to say, it's his favorite animal is the shark. Darius struggled a little bit with his speech, but since he's got his glasses, he started saying more and more things. And I wanted to make him a shirt that he would recognize and want to talk about. So that's why I chose the Baby Shark image from the Baby Shark TV show. So the first thing I do is take the image into Design Shop 12 Pro. That's the professional Melco digitizing software. After a little bit of work, I'm able to recreate the image in stitches. I also add the personalized wording to the finished picture. One thing I'd like to mention is how in the finished digitization, you can't see the body. That's because it's transparent. It is that way because in the program I've created a tracing stitch and a tack down stitch, which both are just an outlined walk stitch with the applique stop in the Melco OS. That being said, the transparent part will be filled on the actual shirt with fabric that I have cut to size. Unfortunately, I didn't record the hooping process as I decided I was going to make a video after the fact, but just to let you know how it goes, basically I measure with quilting rulers and quilting chalk. The chalk washes off with just a little bit of water and a cloth. In my opinion, it's the best thing for garment marking. Once I figure out my center marks, I take my hoop and fit it with cutaway stabilizer. I then use my hoop bracket to hold the stabilizer on. I then put the hoop inside the garment and find the center on the shirt versus the center of the hoop. Once in place, I take the top hoop and snap it to the back of the hoop, which is inside the shirt. I strictly use magnetic mighty hoops. I find them to be easier than having to spray everything of every size with 505 adhesive. The hoop pictured in this photo is a 10-inch by 10-inch mighty hoop. Because this is an applique, I've chosen a yellow quilting fabric for the body of the shark. I pre-cut it so that it will fit in my design. Then I take it to the heat press to apply a pre-cut layer of heat and bond lite. Doing this will help the fabric adhere to the garment so that it doesn't fray after washing, or while the machine is stitching, it won't move. You can see that the back is shiny. That's adhesive. I'll show you how to apply that to the applique with the iron shortly. Next, we take the hooped garment over to the machine. I personally operate a Melco EMT16X. Fun fact, I call him Big Boy due to his massive size. Okay, so once I have the hoop clicked in, I use the laser alignment to center the design where I previously marked. The thing about the laser is it's slightly off due to the placement of the laser on the machine. Because of this, it's always best practice to drop the needle and ensure the accuracy of your placement. I go into the maintenance panel in the Melco OS software and click bottom head. This drops the needle. One other thing I do is adjust the presser foot at bottom center because this ensures the proper tension for the thickness of the material you're using. I will be using a 100% cotton t-shirt, which is a 9 on the Actifeed preset in OS. Pretty much every time you drop the needle, the machine will become unthreaded. I'm always prepared to rethread at this point. It just is what it is. The next step is to trace your design. There's a star button and a square button on the control panel for the Melco. You must press them together to trace the design. Once placement is confirmed, all there is left to do is press start. Once the start button on the front of the machine is hit, the machine will begin stitching out the design. When I digitized this piece, I made it so the placement stitch came first. Basically, digitizing is just a makeup of layers and overlaps. You have to look at the picture you're creating and decide what comes first so you can place the other elements on top of it. Once the machine finishes stitching out the placement, you can put your prepped fabric over the shape and cut the fabric to size if it's too large. As you can see, my fabric needs a bit of a trim. You're going to want to cut it so it completely covers the placement stitch, but that it doesn't extend up and over top your hoop. If the fabric isn't flush with the garment, then you risk shifting of the material during the stitch out. The next step is to spray the adhesive on the back of your prepped fabric. I put a thing of cardboard down usually so that I can spray on top of it. I use 505 adhesive, but any kind of temporary quilting adhesive will work. The reason I use the box is just because the spray, if it gets on the floor or on a table, it's quite tacky and hard to remove. So you don't want to ruin your surfaces that way. Also, don't worry about the spray. It won't interfere with the heat and bond on the back of the fabric. Basically, the 505 will ensure that your fabric is sticky enough to not shift while it stitches. These machines, they move very fast, and if you don't secure your fabric, you may have bunching or shifting or other possibilities that will make you have to scrap your project if you're not able to fix it and start all over. Once your fabric is stuck down properly, you can hit start and the machine will do the tack down stitch. After the tack down stitch is complete, the machine should push the hoop out for an applique. You can then detach the hoop from the machine and take it to a comfortable and convenient spot for trimming the excess. I always use my curved applique scissors, as the curve makes it so you don't cut your shirt or sweater or whatever it is that you're working on, which would be no bueno. You're going to want to peel back the fabric as it will be glued down to the garment. Slide your finger around underneath it and make sure you've detached it enough that you can work your scissors around it nicely without problems. When cutting, you want to stay as close as possible to the stitch line without snipping it. That way you won't have any excess fibers that stick out once you start stitching your outline. Mind you, if you do start stitching and you do notice that there's a fiber that sticks out, you don't need to panic because this can all be fixed when you do your trims at the end. Here you can see that my shark is trimmed and finished. Once you're done with all the trimming, next comes the ironing. Ironing is an important step. It activates the heat and bond. Heat and bond helps with thinner fabrics that tend to fray. It also helps with keeping the two fabrics together and reduces rippling. I also use a Teflon sheet between the iron and my work just so that I don't have any mishaps. Nothing sucks more than being halfway through a project and then you burn your shirt. The way that you check if the heat and bond adhesive has activated is by the look and the feel of it. Like if you touch it, is the applique heated evenly? If not, you should press those cooler spots. The other thing I look for is you can tell if the fabric has flattened. It looks like ripples are gone and it's evenly pressed. Once you get to that point, you should be able to stick the hoop back into the machine, click it in, and hit start. This next part looks a little bit faster than it actually was, but that's just for the sake of the video. I've sped it up. When I run my machine for an applique, I usually run it a bit slower than I would for something that's all stitches. Generally, I would run it between 600 and 750 stitches per minute. I do this because you don't want any slipping of the edges. As I said before, the machine runs really, really fast. So if you have that needle dropping and it grabs the edge of the fabric that hasn't been completely adhered to the garment, it can cause it to pull up. It can cause bunching. I also use a thinner needle. The one I have loaded in, it's a 9 by 65, so that's generally one of the smaller needles that they have. I like that because it gives more space between the holes, so you're not, for instance, punching something out. It's going to be interlocked. So that's kind of like my thing for it. Another thing to note, like
on the topic of digitizing designs. I don't know how many of you create your own projects, but one thing I learned when I started is that the machine runs best when it doesn't have to stop. So utilize your walk stitches, fewer trims equal a better run, and a cleaner finished product. And I know you all want that. So here it is the baby shark fresh off the machine with no trims. And then the next one, I've given it a quick trim before I take it off the hoop.
There you have it, guys. That's our video. We briefly covered digitizing, we covered hooping, proper prep of your fabric, and the general overall stitch out process. I hope you guys learned something that you can take away from this video and apply to your own projects. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and happy stitching.